Hey, everybody, welcome to the Test 65 review with me, Chris, from LSAT Demon. This is the last time I'll be teaching this class, and it's also the last time that I will be teaching this class with logic games. Really, the last time we'll have any test review with logic games. They're going away, which might make you wonder, is Chris himself a logic game? And is that why he has to leave? Could be. Today, we're going to go over general test-taking advice. I'm going to answer your questions about things to do to prep for your test. I'm going to answer content-specific questions about these three sections, the way to approach them, the mindset you should have, how to grow, whether your test is next week or in 6 months. I want to be able to speak to skills that are going to translate to both of these. So I'm also joined by our future teacher, Robert, joining our team here at LSAT Demon. Incredible, super good at the test. And I was wondering, Robert, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and giving all these students one tip for their test day.
Sure. I think one of the things that really helped me with taking the test is keeping the same routine. I think that was important. That was one of the things that Ben and Nathan talked about a lot on their podcast about test day and kind of overcoming test anxiety and just keeping the same routine, whatever it was. Just keep doing it. And like one of the things I like to do, I go for a run first thing in the morning. I went for a run. I did the same thing I was going to do, no matter what it was. I think the beauty about testing at home is we do get to test in the same environment we've been practicing. And I think that was very helpful too. So that was one
Incredible.
of the things for me.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Robert. And anyone in class, Robert will be working the chat tonight. Any questions I can't get to, or you just want to answer in a DM, you can also just DM Robert questions if you don't want them out here in the public. I see a couple hands already. Juliana, what can I help you with?
Sorry, I forgot to put my hand down.
That's totally fine. Chalet, you're up next.
Hi. My question's about, I guess, logical reasoning. Just do you have any tips? I feel like I've kind of been in the same, like I always out of like the 20-ish questions I attempt, like I miss like one or two or like maybe even zero sometimes, but I really kind of want to make room to like get those like last 5 questions in. I just want, or even one question. So I just want like any advice that you have for, that.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, congrats on the place that you're at already. That is incredible growth to be at in LR, and you're in a good place. You're growing the way you want to. The nature of skill building is as you get to the tougher parts, the end of your journey, the harder questions, the growth is a little bit slower. But first, I'll talk about in general, when it comes to LR, RC, or LG, what is growth and how to facilitate it. How to really push yourself forward when you feel like you're plateauing. And this is a nice segue too, because LR is the first section I wanted us to do tonight. So I'll be able to talk about LR and also answer your question. So when we look at doing LR, for me, it's really a question of consistent method. And if you have a method that allows you to answer level 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, but it's kind of failing us on 5, then this means either we're aborting before we get there, or the way that we answer all those questions before is a little inconsistent across the board. So what I like to do is frame LR in general in the way that it should feel when it's going well. We'll go through a couple examples, and then you can reflect in your own experience. Anyone here in the class, or you Chalet specifically, this is how you feel when you're in a level 4 or 5 question. So across all sections of the test, LR as well, I tell students to push for this 80-20 ratio. And it's a time ratio, it's an effort ratio. But what this means is I want 80% of your time, however much it is, 80% of your effort, however much that ends up being, in the argument until you feel like you've won. Reading this passage carefully, a word at a time, before ever looking at the answer choices. Once I start tearing through A, B, C, D, and E, I have to know already what I'm looking for and ways to eliminate wrong answers. I need to be able to go into those on offense, looking to eliminate at the first opportunity. So for me, it's a question of, do I know enough to move forward? And how I know when I know enough that I can move forward. For me, there are discrete checkpoints in an LR question that tell me if I really know enough to move on. So when I first started LR, I would read an argument, I'd get to the end, I'd usually point out the conclusion, say, this is it. And I'd say, like, is this a good argument or a bad argument? Which to me ended up being like a conversation more about vibes. You know, did I like it? Did I not like it? But sometimes it ended up being more, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? For me, the only way we can look at logical reasoning is in terms of logical validity. Either the argument is absolutely perfect, it wins every single time, no matter what we do, or it's totally and completely wrong. And so for me, the first checkpoint was identifying in a totally and completely wrong argument exactly what I would say to show why it's totally and completely wrong. Looking at the evidence, looking at what the author wants, and being able to point to something specifically that shows why it fails. Why? Not necessarily. If I couldn't do that, I wasn't ready to leave. I had to dig in more. When I failed this, I would say, well, I think the conclusion's too strong. It goes too far. Then I'd go to the question. I'd say like, okay, I need to weaken it. So I need to make it less likely that, and I would just restate the conclusion. And then I was just kind of bouncing around between answer choices. It would take me forever. So versus that 80-20 ratio that I wanted to have, it ended up being closer to like 50-50, or sometimes way more in the answer choices than in the argument. So for me, that was a sign that I failed. I can only look at the answer choices when I know I have exactly the tools I need to eliminate them by either knowing what the right answer must say or the criteria it has to have to move on. So growth then should be, I do these questions, they were a little harder. Even if I got them correct, maybe I didn't get it correct as cleanly as I want to. Identifying what behaviors, what parts of your process were really a component of that. The other thing I want to stress tonight, you'll see me in LR, you'll see me in RC. I always set the standard for myself of only reading every sentence one time, which might sound crazy, it'll sound wild. But when I didn't do that, it meant I was only ever half reading or quarter reading everything because I knew it was still going to be there. I would read fast. I might pick out a couple things that seemed neat. I'd go to the next question. And I would leave not feeling like I was done. So I'd start over and I'd start over. And then I'd get to the answer choices and I'd reread the argument because I felt like I was missing something. Always and everywhere, I was rereading and rereading. When you think about what this actually does across your whole test, sometimes it means you're reading the equivalent of 2 or 3 LSATs in one sitting to take a test. And you're also not doing the work in front of you while it's there for you to do. When you look at every single word with 100% of your attention and focus, thinking about it, weighing it, critiquing it before moving on to the next, you know there's nothing that word is doing that you haven't recognized. So many times when I would be doing LR, I'd get a question wrong. I'd immediately see a word in an answer choice that clearly stands out that, oh my God, how did I accept that? Or I'd see even like a half a sentence in the argument that I totally forgot or messed up on. That became so frustrating to me, almost offensive to me that I would let myself do that because it's such an easy thing to prevent, just reading slowly. And so I invented this magic law that I could only ever read these things one time, which meant I spent enough time to understand it before moving on. Sometimes you'll see me fudge it, you know, read a sentence over again or say, oh my gosh, that was too much. And I'd go back and restart. But that's because understanding is my goal now. I never leave a sentence without understanding it. So I want to actually demonstrate that in one question I want us to do together. I just dropped it in chat. This is Section 1, question 17. This was the #1 most voted for question students wanted to review. After this, we'll probably do an RC passage, and we'll end with a logic game, so you get to see all the flavors of test prep. But please ask me questions as we go through. So I'm going to read this to you, and I want you to follow along, reading it the same way I would if I were on a test, just kind of verbalizing my thoughts instead of them being up here. Okay, so we have an economist talking to us. Hate those guys. This one says, some critics, so anytime we see a qualifier word like that, I like to pay attention. I don't know if it's going to be relevant, but some critics could be anywhere from 1 to every single critic in the world. Really flexible word, doesn't tell me much. So some critics of the media have contended Okay, they've argued this. The critics of the media believe this, that negative news reports on the state of the economy. Even here, I stop and chew. What would this mean? It's news headlines talking about the economy being so bad, right? Inflation up, wages down, unemployment, all those types of things. Contextualize things, paint pictures when you can. Now I've got this picture, I'm ready to move. So some critics are arguing that this negative news about the economy can actually harm the economy. Okay, so if this is the argument I'm weighing, this is something they need to prove, right? They have to draw a connection between how this negative news actually damages the economy. I have to see some economic report impacting a metric of the economy. What's weird about this is I don't know how they're defining economy. I don't know how they would define harm. I don't know what news would technically be negative, which would not, right? This argument's going a little bit into uncharted territory, which isn't a problem for me. It's a problem for the argument. They have to make everything clear. So we'll read ahead. Let's explore this. Because such reports damage people's confidence in it. Okay. So there's kind of a hole here. It says negative news can damage the economy because it can damage people's confidence in it. Has it told us that the economy succeeds or fails based on confidence yet? Has it drawn a connection? Has it told us why or how confidence there? Again, I don't even know if this is the argument we'll ultimately end up critiquing, but for me, any argument I ever see, any opinion I ever see, this is the mode I go into because it helps you understand. You can really dig into these arguments. You won't fail an LR question when you read it to this degree. So what I anticipate then is some connection between confidence and what it's doing to the economy. It continues saying, and this lack of confidence, great, in turn, adversely affects people's willingness to spend money. All right, so we still don't have a guaranteed argument here. It's one you could make some soft inferences that if people aren't willing to spend money, then maybe they don't spend money, then maybe that hurts the economy. But still, this is a little bit of shaky area. Now, I want to remember, this is an argument that's being presented to me from critics of the media. Our author is an economist. So what this tells me is our author, the economist, is going to make an argument about this argument. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Let's see. Okay. But studies show that spending tends to correlate very closely with people's confidence in their own immediate economic situations. Let's look at this piece of evidence. Okay. So the news media say negative reports can lower confidence, that hurts the economy. Our economist says, however, actually, you're wrong, but we see but implies disagreement. People's spending correlates with their confidence in their own immediate economic situations. My question is, why the hell do these have to be different? The first sentence talks about lowering confidence. Why would this not necessarily be confidence in their own economic situations? Anybody who's had like a 401k or retirement invested in the economy sure gets a little spooky when the economy crashes and your whole retirement disappears, right? You could hear about that on news headlines. So what we can see is the editor is presenting this as if it's the smoking gun challenge to the argument above, when it really doesn't have to be. This isn't a fact that is unaccounted for in the argument. It could totally work. These could absolutely be the same thing, okay? And it could be that these news reports manufacture this lack of confidence. So this is something that we absolutely can attack here. Remember, either an argument is totally pristine, perfect, chef's kiss, or absolutely flawed, completely wrong. When it's completely wrong, we have to put the work in to see why. For me, even though I don't think we've hit the conclusion, must be that last little squib sentence, this is something that just doesn't add up. This confidence could totally be the same, could be a result of the same phenomenon. Okay, news media reports could still lower people's confidence in their own situations. Last sentence here, thus, these media critics are mistaken. feel like we've really put a fork in this argument. Feels done. The news media does not have to be mistaken, because the news media reports could very well affect people's confidence in their own immediate economic situations. It's not just reports about the economy in general, when lots of what we do could be tied to the economy. So let's read this question, see what's going on. It says the economist's argument is flawed and that it fails to consider the possibility that, okay, we see a classic flaw question. What we want to do in these questions is, one, hold dearly to that understanding we worked so hard to build. Do not leave that in the argument, carry it with you, it's your best weapon. This understanding of where there is a gap is what's going to be key in recognizing the correct answer choice, because it's not going to be written in the exact words that we predict, but they should be words we recognize do exactly what we want them to. What I want words to do is to tell us that there's no reason why news reports couldn't also lower people's confidence in their own economic situation. These two confidences don't have to be separate. They could very well interact with each other. The author says absolutely no, they can't. They have to be mistaken, which certainly doesn't have to be the case. In general, when we're looking at flaw questions, start there. It has to match that prediction, that understanding, because that's what the argument did wrong, point blank. We work hard enough in the argument that we can leave it with that confidence that this is what it did wrong. If you don't feel that confident leaving the argument, we stay in. Because if I'm not confident about why it's wrong, as soon as I read an answer choice that says something different, I start to doubt. I start to wonder, I start to try to work for that answer choice or reconsider my understanding. If anything about my understanding is shaky, I've got more work to do. So start with that prediction. You can also ask two questions every time you look at a flaw answer choice. One, is it a problem? What I mean by this is, if you took the words on the page, what answer A says, what answer B says, would that actually be an issue? Would that be a logical error? Often you see words on a page that would not be a problem. Even if they were true, even if the argument did it, it still wouldn't be a flaw. It's okay. The other thing, once we pass this, our flaw answer has to actually be a logical flaw. The second thing we ask is, did it happen? We have a rock solid understanding of a problem with this argument. Often, arguments can be flawed in multiple ways. There can be other issues with an argument that might be smaller than ours, could be bigger than ours, but can be associated with this argument. What we have to investigate is, if the answer choice is an issue, it's a real problem, did it happen in our argument? The way that we hone in on this is looking first at the argument's conclusion. Any flaw has to be related in what the author is actually trying to argue, what they care about. If it's not what they're concluding, it's not going to be the flaw with the argument. Here, we're just concluding critics are wrong, okay? Our flaw has to be something related to that. And this will be the gap between their facts and the conclusion. The flaw answer has to sit right in the middle of those, okay? So let's dig into these answers here. We'll eliminate all the wrong ones. We're going into these always looking to eliminate wrong answers as early as possible. Let's check out A. A says, one's level of confidence in one's own economic situation. Okay, this seems to be very closely related to that second sentence here, what our author was saying. Affects how one perceives reports about the overall state of the economy. Well, even so, this wouldn't necessarily tell me anything about the phenomenon that the argument is describing, right? So if people have low confidence in their economic situation, then still it could be possible for these negative news reports to hurt the economy, to lower it, right? And this doesn't preclude it being a relationship back and forth. So this one just says, if I have low confidence in my economic situation, that maybe it will affect how I perceive reports. But look at that language. It affects how one perceives reports. We don't know if it's a good effect or bad effect from the language of this answer choice. This one borders on unusable for anybody, because the critics of the media would want this to be a negative effect. Our guy would want it to be either no effect or positive effect. This one doesn't tell me either. It just says there is change. Well, that's not very specific. And it doesn't tell me. It absolutely speaks to the flaw in this argument, which doesn't match our prediction here. Let's go into B. B says, news reports about the state of the economy are not always accurate. This, again, doesn't really touch our conclusion. Whether the news reports are accurate or not, what we care about is how do they affect people's confidence? This could still affect people's confidence if they were fake news or false reports, or if they were true. What we're talking about is the impact. We don't have any delineation in our facts and our premises about true reports or false reports. So I don't want to see that here in the answer choice. This can't be the flaw because it doesn't match any of our evidence. We wouldn't have anywhere to insert this in this connection between premise and conclusion. We would be assuming something if we tried to plug this in. If the argument doesn't account for truth or falsehood, we don't really want to say the flaw of the argument is based in a truth or falsehood of the news. Let's check out C. C says people who pay no attention to economic reports in the media. Okay. We want to stop here already. Is this who our argument is about? What do we think? We say news reports, negative news reports about the economy can affect the economy adversely, can hurt it. Are we talking about people who don't watch the news already? Here I've got a problem. We're trying to prove the economist's argument wrong, which means I need to say, look at these people that just watched this negative news report. Their confidence isn't shaken. This is what our economists would say. So me bringing in a fact about people who didn't watch the news doesn't actually help our economists argue that point, right? This can't be the logical gap. This, again, kind of unrelated. Let's check out D. D says people who have little confidence in the overall economy. Whenever we see a phrase like this in identifier, we want to translate it using our understanding of the argument. We plug it in. So who would this relate to in our argument? People who have little confidence in the overall economy. Well, from the terms of our premise, this should be people who aren't willing to invest much, aren't willing to spend. This is exactly the population our critics were talking about, right? Okay, so we're moving in the direction that we want. This is a population we can identify. It's a piece of understanding we can stick. What we have to do is show how this group could also think their own economy sucks, their own finances could suck, because this is how we could merge that prediction we had about the flaw, that this confidence could be shaken overall, both in the national economy and in my own personal one. Okay, generally take a pessimistic view concerning their own economic situations. If this were true, if this is an attack we could levy against the argument, our conclusion is kind of nonsensical. The critics don't have to be wrong in this case. This would mean people who watch a news report, get low confidence, say, shoot, now my finances are bad too. This means our author, our economist, really off base by trying to separate these phenomena when they don't have to be. D matches our understanding. It matches the issue in the argument. It shows the economist why the economist is wrong. It is a problem. It did happen. These are all the things we should feel when we see the correct answer in a flaw question. This has got to be it. Let's check out E, and then I'll answer any questions about this one before we hop into a passage. E says, an economic slowdown usually has greater impact. Now, here already I've got some issues. This would be a big yellow light for me in an answer choice. I'm proceeding with caution. What we are trying to disprove is, well, let me be careful. What the economist is trying to disprove is the effect of negative news on the economy, okay? Our author says that's totally mistaken to say that it has a negative impact. Here, I'm just talking about economic slowdowns having a greater impact. This one doesn't necessarily tell me about the effect of news on people investing. It would be hard for my flaw to be based in this when this is different than the critic's original argument about the media. We'll read on. I have a lot of pause here. So it says, usually has a greater impact on the economic situation of individuals if it takes people by surprise than if people are forewarned. Our argument isn't about the actual impact on individuals. It isn't even about the actual state of the economy or their actual personal finances, their immediate economic situations. It's all just about belief. What do they think about it? How does that affect their buyer behavior? E is talking about actual impact of economic slowdowns. What does this mean? It's not based in the logic of our argument. It's not talking about the same thing that we are, which means it can't be the flaw. This is not something that happened. This is talking about the real world impact of how much money people actually have. Our argument is entirely about their feelings about it, their confidence in it. That's how I would eliminate E. Any questions about this one or LR more broadly? This is a good time to ask about specific question types or why we do questions the way that we do at LSAT Demon, reading the argument first, then the question and the answer choices. Any of those you want to ask? Absolutely happy to answer. Because after we leave this one, we're heading to RC land. None. Okay, great.
Hey, Chris, could we go into A a little more in depth on
Sure.
why we think that one might be wrong?
Absolutely. Okay, so when we look at A, let's sit with the language with it specifically, but remember we want to carry in our prediction, right? It's totally possible for news to impact one's personal confidence in their finances. What's at issue is the impact that news has. Our author says totally mistaken, okay? So A says, one's level of confidence in one's own economic situation affects how one perceives reports about the overall state of the economy. The first thing that I want to think about this in the language, what I keep sitting with is knowing that it affects it doesn't tell me how it affects it. I've got no idea what the change is. I don't know if it's a good change, if it's a bad change. And why is this relevant? Well, because our author is saying it can.
All right. He was in the middle of a great point there. Sorry about that, guys. I'm sure he'll be right back any second. Can I ask what other questions in LR were people struggling with? You could either kind of unmute, let us know, or put it in the chat. I want to make sure that we can get to as many as we can. I'm seeing question 25. Okay. R.I.P. Chris. That's fantastic. Looks like he was trying to get out a little too soon. Like lots of games aren't done yet, man. All right, so we got a bunch here. You see, I see question 25 and question 19 both. I guess question 19 gets a third vote with 18 through 22. We got a few for 20, bunch for 19. Okay, so we'll jump into that. I will jump in and let's look at 19 real quick until Chris gets back. I'm not sure where he was going next, but give me just a second. I'll share my screen with you guys. And we're talking about question 19 on section 1. Am I correct? Yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of heads now. All right, fantastic. So let's take a look at that. Oh, all right. So if you guys can pull it up, I'm unable to share because he put the he didn't give me the host superpowers. So if you guys can pull it up on your screens, I'll jump in. And so if we take a look at that one, second two. It says last winter was mild enough to allow most bird species to forage naturally. Now, one of the things I actually learned from Chris in his classes when I was studying was right away, a couple things stick out right away. Can anybody tell me what sticks out to you if you've been with Chris very long? Just reading up until that first comma. Even throw it in the chat if you have an idea. Exactly. So most bird species, anytime we start saying descriptive words like that, those are always big red flags. They're always things to go, okay, most, and most according to what, right? So you always want to see, what are we comparing it to? That's one of the things that always sticks out whenever we're reading in logical reasoning, is identifying these descriptive words, quantifier words, any of those kind of terms. Those are things that should catch our attention, because the LSAT's going to see, are we paying attention to that? So last winter was mild enough to allow most bird species to forage naturally, which explains why the proportion of birds visiting feeders was much lower than usual. Now, right away, do we know what usual means? No, I'm seeing a bunch of head. No. Oh. Yeah, we much lower than usual. Okay, well, what's baseline? What are we comparing that against? And those are things that, as we're reading, we can start asking ourselves these questions in our head. And initially, when we're doing it, it's not going to be quick, right? I don't know everybody's levels of experience with the test yet, but one of the things that I struggled with in the very beginning is it took me forever to get through these things, reading like this. But the more you practice these critical reading skills, the faster you get at them. And then the speed starts to come when you've practiced these enough. And right away, are we being told somebody's opinion? Are we being told facts? Are we being told, what are we being told in this first sentence? See if anybody's gonna throw something in the chat. Facts. Okay, so no opinions, no anything. So right away, we know this isn't somebody, we're not 100% sure where this is going to fit in the role. The mild winter also allowed many species. Okay, many. How many? 1, 2, 5, 52%, 99%. The mild winter also allowed many species to stay in their summer range all winter without migrating south. A couple quantifier descriptive words in there. Thereby limiting the usual attrition accompanying migration. Again, usual attrition. Do we know how much the attrition is? Not sure. Hence, last year's mild winter is responsible for this year's larger than usual bird population. Okay, so what do we know about this? Where did we get to already? What do we know based off what we just read right here? What's the purpose? What's this person trying to explain to us? Correlation, causation. Yeah. It's trying to say that last year's mild winter is responsible for this year's larger than usual bird population. So right away, we can take a look at, what do we think about that as the conclusion of why the whole purpose of this, of what this person's trying to tell us. Okay. Reading the chat as we're going at the same time. So maybe not eating on the feeders helped these birds survive. Last winter was mild enough to allow most bird species to forage naturally. So the mild winter allowed them to eat more. So could that be a reason why the mild winter is responsible for larger than usual bird population? Is that reasonable to assume? Is that reasonable to accept? And it explains why the proportion of birds visiting feeders was much lower than usual. Okay. Mild winter also allowed many species to stay in the summer range all winter without migrating south. Could we be losing birds on a usual basis when they're migrating south and not coming back? Could something be happening to them where they either don't come back, either maybe they die, maybe they don't make it, maybe they just decide, you know what, I like it down south, we're staying here. The question says, which of the following, if true, most strengthen the reasoning in the argument? Okay, so what are we going to do right away on a strengthen question? What's the first thing that we're trying to figure out? More yum-yums in the wild, perhaps. Okay, so we want to strengthen. So a couple things we're going to want to come up with a prediction. It's one of the first things that we're going to want to do when we come out of that is, before we jump to the answers, we want to understand what the main conclusion is, which we do. It's the mild winter. The mild winter is the reason why there's a higher normal bird population. Okay, we want to understand that conclusion, which we do. We want to understand what the premises are, which it's because of the attrition, less attrition. It's because there's more food available, readily available. They don't have to rely on people being nice and putting them in feeders. So we want to try to figure out what else could be out there that could potentially strengthen this. What are some ideas that we can think about that we could strengthen? Good idea. We could be also looking for a defender. I'll get to that in a second.
There's no
What are
human
some of the
influence.
things? Good one. Okay, no human influence. All right. What else? Fire them out there, you guys. You could unmute, throw them out there.
Increased mating.
Ooh, increased mating. Because there's more birds available, they're coming back. They can increase mating. Maybe something with more food available to them. Okay.
I mean, you
What
could
else?
also just, use a defensive strengthener and just point out or rule out any objections. Like, what if mild winters come with things that could offset the benefits to be gained from other things?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if anybody's already answered this and gone into the explanation, one of the things that I think is good about this is, do we have any objections to this argument? I mean, it sounds pretty plausible all the way through, right? That's one of the things on the LSAT is being able to, the reason why the conclusion is so important, one of the reasons why it's so important to understand what the conclusion of anything is because to back up that conclusion, something has to come after the because. If I or anybody else gives you an opinion, well, why? Why do you think that? Why are you saying that? And when they do, that because is going to be the reasoning, right? The reasoning is just the because, whatever they're using to justify their conclusion. And one of the easiest things to do to just tear apart LR and any LR question is when that because just doesn't make sense, right? And when the because isn't matching up to leading to that conclusion. And in this particular instance, we can see that the because is making sense. And that's where I think also on these strengthener questions, sometimes you get one like this where it just kind of flows, it makes sense. And so you have to be prepared to say, well, one of the things that it could be asking us when it's going to strengthen it is maybe it's something to defend it, right? It may not be something that's going to make it, move it forward, but it'll be something that will protect it versus a weakener as well. And when we take a look at this, if we look at A, increases in bird populations sometimes occur following unusual weather patterns. What do we think about that?
The thing is, we don't really know if the weather itself is unusual, like it's mild winters that are happening. We know that the implications of it are a little bit unusual, but to say that the weather itself, and sometimes like someone could object and be like, all right, well, this time it happened.
Exactly. That right away, great catch. It didn't say anything about the mild weather was unusual, right? Did it say, did anybody catch that anywhere in the passage? Did it say anything about the mild weather was unusual? Or did it say something else was unusual? I think somebody already had it. They DM me. Yeah. Yeah. So right there, limiting the usual attrition. So the attrition was the unusual thing, not the weather. So we can just go right away and go, that's not right. So B, when birds do not migrate south, the mating behaviors they exhibit differ from those they exhibit when they do migrate. What's wrong with that answer? Good job, Don. Differ how? What does it say? Did the passage say anything? Are we even talking about, is the whole point of this passage something about birds migrating south? Is that what the topic is? Exactly. I don't care. That's fantastic. So yeah, we can rule out B right away. And another thing, so another tip when we're going through these LR questions and RC for that matter, is one of the things I like to do is I really believe in what Nate talks about. We don't need to give these answers too much credit. A lot of times, I think one of the biggest mistakes I know I made when I initially started was trying to get to an answer and trying to figure out, is this the correct answer? Instead of going to an answer and going, you need to prove to me why you're correct, right? 4 of you are wrong, 1 of you is right. So I know walking into the answers, I've got a 4 out of 5 chance. I got an 80% chance that the answer I'm reading is wrong. So I didn't go, once I learned to not go into the answers looking for a reason why, looking for like, hey, how is this right? It's like, no, you're wrong until you're guilty until proven innocent here. And I think that was one of the approaches that was really helpful in being able to cast away answers really fast. When we get to something and it's talking about something so totally off topic, it's like, no, you're out of here. And we don't need to spend 1 more second on that answer. And you see Nate do it a lot. You see Ben do it a lot when they go through answer choices and they're 2-3 words in. They're like, this isn't right. And for all the speed demons out there, that's another way that we pick up speed as we get better. It's difficult to do in the beginning, a little easier as you go. It becomes really easy in the end to get in real quick and go, we're not talking about that, you're out. Or some word will pop in there and just, if that word wasn't there, that answer would be correct, but that word is there. So I'm not going to try to wrestle with that answer and try to make it a right answer and try to justify like, well, on some stretch, no, it's wrong. And I think that's one of the things that we can do to just blast through answers a lot faster too. So hopefully that helps. We go to C. Birds eating at feeders are more vulnerable to predators than are birds foraging naturally. But I'm seeing some yeses. I'm seeing some head nods. I'm seeing some yeses. Why do we think that? Anybody throw out there? Why do we think that one's a strength there?
I mean, it's one less thing to worry about, right? If you're not vulnerable to predators now, like you're probably going to have a more conducive time to your well-being, like grow the population.
Right. One of the things that, if we look at the conclusion, the mild winter is what's responsible for the larger than usual bird population. One of the becauses is the mild winter allowed more birds to forage naturally. So they weren't eating on feeders. Well, if we further that and go, and birds that remain in their summer range all winter, birds eating at feeders are more vulnerable to predators than are birds foraging naturally. Well, then that goes right along and strengthens the argument, because it goes right along with the first premise that's in there. Is everybody following how that goes? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to check in the chat real quick, and we'll go check up the last two. Because it's an effect on the mild winter and contributes to a potential larger population. Bingo, great job. Explain why they aren't decreasing, which inadvertently explains why they're increasing. On that particular one, it's not asking us to, I don't think that we need to wonder why it's not decreasing, because the argument is saying that it is increasing. And so I'm not sure that is going to be something that we're going to have to do in this particular one. It just didn't fit. It didn't align. It's giving us all the information. It's saying this is happening, so this is happening, and it's asking us to then continue on with more of that. I think there could be a world where if there wasn't an answer like C, maybe there's there could be something maybe defending against why. An answer could say something like why they're not decreasing. But I guess in a world, if we look at C, it's kind of saying why they're not decreasing, right? If you combine C with the first sentence, it's kind of saying that, you know, they're not decreasing, because if they were foraging on if they were foraging on feeders, there's a strong likelihood that they, you know, maybe that the predators are getting them. But since that's not happening, more can stick around. So, but then we could look at D and E and figure out why they're wrong. Birds that remain in their summer range all winter often exhaust that range's food supply before spring. What's wrong with that one?
Doesn't explain a population increase at all.
Mm-mm. No, as a matter of fact, it weakens it, right? That's a weakener to the argument. Birds sometimes visit feeders even when they are able to find sufficient food for survival by foraging naturally. What direction does that take the argument? I love it. Irrelevant. That's one of the ones where somebody said to me like, "Oh, and what's your point? where are we going with that?" There's nothing there. It's not taking us, it's not strengthening, it's not weakening, it's taking us nowhere. So it's irrelevant. So before we jump back over to Chris, what questions do we have? I thought I saw Chris came back. There he is. What questions do we have about this one? Because I know it was one of the ones that people were asking a lot about. I'm going to hear Ben's voice ripping in my head. My inner demon was Nate. When I need a reassurance, my inner angel would be Ben. My inner demon would be Nate. Every time I read it, it was BS. This is BS. So, hate to be honest. So, any other questions? Because this was one that you guys put in there a lot that you wanted to cover. So I just want to make sure we got all your questions answered on this one. If we're
I think
good,
Chalet might have had one. Did you have one, Chalet?
oh,
Yeah, I did. I was just wondering, like, because going in, I couldn't think of like a very good like weakener, or like I didn't have a good prediction, so it made me nervous going into the answers. And so I was like, do you just have any advice for like
so
not getting
can I be?
like tripped up?
Yeah. Chris, can I take this? Can I be honest? I'm jumping on camera with you guys. Chris just, you know, RIP Chris, right? That's what we put in the chat. We pull up question 19. I read it real quick before I jumped into, and I'm like, I don't have a, wait, what? And so I got caught too. Right now, I got caught. I'm like, I don't have a, okay, it sounds good. And this was one of the ones that I guess I could have done a better job articulating in the beginning. We get these sometimes where it's actually easier to come up with predictions when, as my inner Nate would say, BS, right? We can see it and go, well, no, there's that gap, right? Like Chris was showing us on the whiteboard earlier. You're giving me the because, and you're telling me what you think, but there's a gap here. And it's easier, in my opinion, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, I found it easier to predict things when I could call BS on something. But when it would just be, you know, there's some LR questions that are just a set of facts. And it's like, well, I think I can kind of, you know, I think I can kind of see where this might be going. But, you know, and until you get to the question, then you're like, okay, maybe I think I can come up with some predictions. But in this particular one, and then it says strengthen it, I couldn't think of anything readily. So sometimes you may not have a prediction. You just might not. But you know, when you have a structure of what you're looking for, again, going to the answer saying, you need to prove to me why you're right, because there's an 80% chance you're wrong. You can then protect yourself from kind of the BS that the answer might be trying to get you. And because you're going to find yourselves, sometimes you might not have a prediction. And especially as you're getting better at making predictions, there's going to be a lot of questions you're going to encounter that you're still working on the predictive skill. So until you get really, really good at it, you're going to have times where you don't predict. But if you know what you're looking for, and you've got a firm grip on what we're doing in this type of question, you can solve any of those type of questions, if that makes sense. Hopefully I answered it correct.
I think what I would add, Robert, I wouldn't disagree with anything you said, is that when we look at an argument like this, you can make the best case for the option you want me to pick, the thing you want me to believe. You can have great evidence that connects to it. But when I have strong language like this conclusion does, I have affirmatively ruled out any other possible thing that would be responsible for the increase in this population, which is difficult. This one made a great case for what this one thinks is responsible. It didn't acknowledge any other thing. So if I were weakening this, any other compelling argument for another thing that could be responsible is on equal footing. This, at the end of the day, is a great example of kind of an opinion-based argument. This is the facts this person's looking at. This is the conclusion they draw. Well, great. What if there are different facts? What if there's a different conclusion somebody else draws? In a valid argument, they will make it impossible for any other thing but this conclusion to be true. So if I were looking to weaken this, some brand spanking new fact that would also account for it, like there was a bird mutation that made them lay triple the eggs they usually do, or their predators we found out were super delicious, so we started serving them at all of our fast food restaurants. Anything like that could be a compelling reason. I kind of think of this like car shopping. If I show up to a dealership and I say, hey, I want to buy a car, and they show me one car, they pull it out in front of me and they tell me all the awesome things about this car, am I going to buy it without looking at the whole lot? I hope not. Don't do that. You want to see all the other cars, aren't there? The problem with this one, we didn't get to see any of the other cars. I didn't get to see any of the other arguments. So this car looks good. I still kind of want to see what else is out there. So this one's still not logically perfect. And we can recognize that when we see it's an inherent comparison. We are saying none of the other reasons for why there could be a larger population can be right. Well, they still could, even given the language on this argument here. Thanks for taking the torch while I was gone. We're going to hop over to RC. Full disclosure, everyone, this is a just Chris special. We're going to go overtime a little bit today. I want to make sure we get the growth we need, and I'll work the class time out. If you have to go, we'll be here on the recording. We're still going to cover RC. We're still going to cover LG for any of our June bugs out there. Don't sweat. We're going to do RC next. So the passage we voted for the most was passage 3 of test 65, Democracy in Action. Great job, passage 3 party. You carried by just 0.8%. Really, really contentious election. Congratulations. You get to decide what all of us have to do forever. So we're going to look at this one. I want to give a little bit of primer on RC before we hop in, just to describe what I'm doing, so that when you see me do it, you might understand why I'm stopping, why I'm talking so much, why I'm trying to predict. The base requirement of RC is understanding what these sentences say. But I want you to realize this is never sufficient for us to always score highly in RC. So what I always do is you'll see me spend a lot of time on what I call the what. This means in every sentence, making sure I understand every word perfectly. When they teach me a concept, I carry it through into that sentence and to others. When there are new concepts, I recognize those and I try to apply the understanding I've built to give them color and direction, all factual understanding. But I only do this for a purpose. I'm not here to memorize. I'm not here to try to carry all these sentences with me. I'm here to try to figure out, what's the story you're telling me and why are you telling me that story? What do you care about? Because that tells me what I care about. So I want to read all of this factual information to figure out why the hell I'm here. What do you want? And I call this moving from what to why. This means I could read all about this scientific theory, all the components that make it up, all the jargon and weird scientific facts you have to tell me. I just want to know, do you agree or you disagree? And what we can always find out in these passages before the author reveals it, using context clues, direction, hints about how they present information, which way they're likely leaning. Or if they agree, if they disagree, what they'd have to do it based on the terms of our argument. And the reason why we spend time here is so that we get to a point in the passage when we are entering sentences knowing what they have to say. We're starting new paragraphs already knowing where they're going to end. This makes it impossible for sentences to really confuse us anymore. It helps us recognize what sentences are important and which ones aren't. I'll be the first one to tell you, in all of these passages, many of the sentences do not matter at all. You would never get paid for understanding them, for memorizing them, for highlighting them at all. What we have to figure out is the author's argument and purpose, which often lies between sentences in things unwritten. So when questions ask us things that seem difficult and we can't find it in the passage anywhere, this is why. We have to read for the author's purpose so we can apply their argument. We're never going to be able to get perfect scores by memorizing this passage or trying to carry all of this factual information without organizing it with us. The last little blurb I see, this is a comparative passage. In a comparative passage, what you're going to see me do is build this. This is a really bad marker. You all pay way too much money at this awesome prep service to have a teacher that uses old dry markers. 1-star review. Whenever I go into a comparative passage, I imagine this mental Venn diagram. We're going to build the world of passage A. We're going to understand it perfectly. We're going to be able to speak as if we were passage A's lawyer. Okay. Throw me into a question. I'll be able to tell you how passage A would answer. We do that so that when we start reading passage B, when we enter that world, every single sentence of passage B, we read applying our understanding from A, saying, what would passage A say about this? What would that author tell us? Because what we're looking for and what questions always ask is, what are our points of overlap? What are things they would agree on, especially when your opinion seems so divergent? When they're really arguing, you know they're going to have some question about where they overlap. They'll also ask us about the outer bounds of their opinion. What really is different between A and B? We can only understand this if we apply this kind of relational learning. I understand A better by understanding B. I understand B better by comparing it with A. We do this process all the way through. The thing I'll tell you, though, is this is what we should do in every passage when there's an argument, whether it's comparative or not, whether two people have the microphone or it's just one person telling us what they think is correct compared to somebody else. Every point of view, every concept we understand in relationship to the things that disagree, the things that agree. We always want to carry this understanding into every single sentence so that we can really compare it and build a comprehensive understanding. Juliana, I pretend like I'm A's lawyer when I'm an A. I pretend like I'm both A's lawyer, B's lawyer, and B, because the questions will ask us to do the same. What would B pick? What would A pick? Because doing so is just a way to measure arguments. What do they want? What would I say? What does this person want? What would the other person say? This is all that the questions ask. Relationship, agreement, disagreement, find an example. This requires just being able to speak from these perspectives. So let's hop into A. We're going to cut this down to size pretty quickly. Okay, passage A starts off saying, in Canadian and United States common law, spoiler for crim law for all of you going into 1L soon, blackmail is unique among major crimes. What does unique mean? It's the only thing that has whatever criteria we're about to learn with it. The way people use unique in real life is just all over the place. Like, oh, you're all unique in my kindergarten class. You're not. They're all just like everybody else, you know. Maybe there's one kindergartner that's unique. Not in this class, though. Anyways, blackmail, unique. Let's find out why. No one has yet adequately explained why it ought to be illegal. Okay, sure. Adequately is doing a lot of work in this sentence. But what we can tell is the author is going to present to us a debate about blackmail that the author is saying isn't solved, unless the author thinks they themselves are the first person to solve this problem. We're gonna get this weird thing about why we don't know why blackmail is illegal. For me, it seems bad, maybe wrong morally to blackmail people. I think that's fine. Maybe I'm the first person that solved our blackmail conundrum, but we're gonna explore a little debate about it, okay? We want to understand why this debate exists, then see if our author presents an answer. The heart of the problem, known as the blackmail paradox, to who? Who knows the blackmail paradox? Anyone in here, raise your hand. I'd love to ask you questions, but okay. We'll call this the blackmail paradox, probably just for this sentence, is that two acts, each of which is legally permissible separately, become illegal when combined. This is a great sentence to look at blackmail and try to think, what the heck 2 acts am I talking about? What's going on? Well, one of them has to be draining money from somebody, taking their coins, right? Another would be knowing their secret, spilling their secret, right? But it's going to be important that very quickly in these next sentences, we pull out what these 2 acts are. We know both of them would have to be legal. If I threaten to expose a criminal act or embarrassing private information, unless I am paid money, I have committed blackmail. That's true. I think you have. Don't need to disagree with that. But here, we must be seeing those 2 acts we're talking about: threatening to expose criminal act, and then the payment of money. But the right to free speech protects my right to make such a disclosure. So we're trying to answer that mini question of what are the 2 acts? Why are they legal? Here we see free speech protects what I want to talk about. Okay. Now, free speech is as against the government, not necessarily between individuals. So a little bit of a caveat, I'd say. Okay. But free speech protects the disclosure, and in many circumstances, I have a legal right to seek money. Okay, well, there's lots of ways you can seek money, but I don't think it's like a legal right. Like, I'm allowed to seek money here. There's nothing you could do. There's lots of ways you can't seek money. I can't like sell McDonald's food in their own driveway to the customers coming right before me. I can't do that. Okay. This is maybe some shady legal analysis, I'd say. But our author is presenting it to us as a problem. Okay. This is what we're here to do. Have fun, attack it, but I still need to be able to speak from this author's opinion. Seeking money, legal. Free speech, legal. Why is blackmail a problem? Maybe our author's a blackmailer. This paragraph ends saying, so why is it illegal to combine them? We might get an answer. Let's see. The lack of a successful theory of blackmail has damaging consequences. Okay. We're not answering the question yet. We're taking a little detour here. To me, what still seems relevant in driving this passage, the why the author is writing it, is so we can get to the heart of this conundrum. But here we're talking about an impact, okay? We'll sit here and see if this becomes a main point. I still think the author is going to try to resolve this question. So it has damaging consequences. Drawing a clear line between legal and illegal acts has proved impossible without one. Okay. So in our author's opinion, not knowing why blackmail is illegal, which we're referring to as a theory of blackmail, has made it impossible to draw a line between legal and illegal acts. I don't know if people are really out there accidentally blackmailing people. I think most people kind of know what should be legal and illegal with that. Not to our author, maybe just accidentally blackmailing people, and this letter is his defense, but sure, okay. Consequently, most blackmail statutes broadly prohibit behavior that no one really believes is criminal and rely on the good judgment of prosecutors not to enforce relevant statutes precisely as written. Okay. If any of you have looked at criminal codes, this is how all of them are. All of us are guilty of everything all the time. I could open a book and just point to a random page, and half the people in here are guilty of whatever I point to. This is just criminal law in general. We're presented a unique problem about blackmail, that we don't have a theory for why it's correct. We're saying this has led to this problem. We have over-encompassing blackmail laws. We're hoping prosecutors don't charge people for them, okay? So if our author is able to solve the theory of blackmail, we're able to present a solution, which remember, we're saying is probably why we're here. It's possible then we would know how to solve this overexpansive statute problem. We'd have a solid theory and a way to remedy our statutes that are getting these legal acts swept up into them, okay? A couple things in this paragraph that might apply later. All right, last paragraph here. It is possible, however, to articulate a coherent theory of blackmail. Aha, our author thinks they're the first person to ever have done this. Remember, unique problem, nobody ever has. Our author thinks they're really special. Okay, let's see what this coherent theory of blackmail is. This should be answering why blackmail is illegal when the component acts are legal, okay? Doing two rights You're getting it wrong, our author says. The key to the wrongness of the blackmail transaction is its triangular structure. If you read this and you say, what the hell is this triangular structure? I'm with you. The reason why I'm comforted is the passage is going to tell me. But what can I take from this triangular structure? Well, blackmail, as I understand it, is me and the person that I'm threatening to drop some hot goss about. Okay? There's going to be another party somewhere that is implicated, or else it's not a triangle. Maybe it's the other party something is about. I have no idea. I have to see 3 components to a triangle. Not a math whiz, but I'm pretty confident in that. The blackmailer obtains what he wants by using a supplementary leverage. Okay, and we have a nice definition for that term right after. Leverage that depends upon a third party. So I have the 2 people involved. Nice, great blackmail interaction, classic. We all know those. The reason why it exists is a third party, this sentence says. The blackmailer is relying on this third party. We're still probably going to meet this third party, so I'm not super concerned. The blackmail victim pays to avoid being harmed by persons other than the blackmailer. Okay, so I am the blackmailer. I know Robert stole like 6 packs of gum from the gas station. I watched him do it. I saw him pocket it. And I'm like, Robert, you got to pay me like $15 or I am telling the store you stole 6 packs of gum. Well, what am I doing? I'm leveraging this third party. Robert loves gum. You wouldn't believe. He just has packs of gum in his pockets all the time. Okay. I'm leveraging that third party. Okay. Gas station, the cops, something. Okay. So Robert and I are leveraging something else on the outside. Okay. For example, when a blackmailer threatens to turn in a criminal unless paid money, the blackmailer is bargaining with the state's chip. This is a sentence you cannot allow yourself to move on from until you figure out what state's chip means. We always have to understand every sentence perfectly before we leave, okay? So how can we read meaning into the state's chip? Well, remember, we're looking at this triangular structure, okay? It's me, it's Robert the gum thief. I'm threatening to turn Robert in. Why would Robert pay me? Why would Robert give me money? So he doesn't go to prison for life for stealing 5 packs of gum. The oppressive power and boot heel of our state is right here. And I am threatening to activate it to squash Robert and his packs of gum. All of them. One stomp. Okay. I'm bargaining with the power of the state's chip. I'm trying to play it. Do I turn this criminal in? Do I get paid $15 so I don't? It's up to me. I'm trying to use the state's power, the state's chip, to impact Robert. Do I have the right to do that? Me, Christopher, LSAT demon teacher? Do I get to decide when our government gets a criminal criminalized? I shouldn't. Okay. I don't want that power. I definitely shouldn't have it for Robert stealing 6 packs of gum. Okay. This is why our author thinks blackmail should be illegal. I'm bargaining with the state's chip, this third party. Okay. So sure, I can say whatever I want about Robert. I have the right to ask Robert for money. When I do so in a way that is weaponizing the power of our government to squash gum thieves, that's overstepping a bit. That's illegal. Okay. I would do all this work here when I read state's chip. You cannot move on without it. We have to understand these words while we're here reading them. This is our best opportunity to do so. But now I feel like I totally understand passage A's argument. Okay, we'll read this last sentence here, then we'll practice being A's lawyer. Thus, blackmail is criminal because it involves the misuse of a third party for the blackmailer's own benefit. Okay, so if I am the lawyer for passage A, I am trying to convict somebody for blackmail, and the judge says, Chris, you're the worst lawyer I've ever seen. Why should blackmail even be illegal? You've got free speech. People can ask each other for money. It's fine. I would say, granted, I'm not a great lawyer, Your Honor, conceded. However, that person is weaponizing power of the state. They're using the state's chip. They're misusing the powers of our government to decide, should this person be turned in for their crime? Should they not? Okay, that is not that person's decision. So when we look at passage A, blackmail is illegal, and it really should be under this theory of blackmail. So we have A totally done. We beat it. We won. Kudos to all of you. Great work. What do we do with that now? We enter passage B with questions in mind. I want to, as early as possible, enter passage B, find a bridge, a tether point to all of this understanding we worked so hard to build in passage A. I am hot and ready to be passage A's lawyer. I want nothing more in life. So as soon as I can see something in passage B I can pounce on, we're talking about blackmail, we're talking about free speech, we're talking about leveraging someone else's power, I'm there. I am ready to start connecting to passage A. We cannot read B in a vacuum. We're looking for overlap. We're looking for disagreement. The only way we'll find it is one, by being super solid on what A is saying, and two, hunting it specifically as we go through. Let's do that now in B. B says, classical Roman law had no special category for blackmail. Okay. No category of its own for blackmail. I'm reading this to maybe mean no specific crime of blackmail. Category is a weird word, but I think this checks out. It was not necessary. Great. Maybe they just loved blackmail, or maybe there is another way they found illegal acts in blackmail to then prosecute with already existing things, right? Maybe we didn't need a special label for blackmail. Maybe other parts of it were already illegal, okay? Roman jurists began their evaluation of specific categories of actions. Okay, very abstract. We're just talking crimes, okay? Jurists, crimes. Jurists looked at crimes by considering whether the crime caused harm, not by considering the legality or illegality of the action itself. So B's first answer to the question passage A poses is like, who cares? Was anybody hurt? Was Robert actually damaged when I threatened to turn him in for his gum theft? No cop would roll out for that. No way. If I was like, hey, Robert was here like 6 days ago, stole 5 packs a game. What's his name? I don't know. Where does he live? I don't know. There's no way. Okay. In Rome, what seems to be important is who was hurt, maybe how much. If I had a blackmail that didn't hurt anybody, maybe we're cool with it. Okay, maybe I'm fine. All right. Their assumption, true enough, it seems. I love when the author just pops in with the microphone to tell you what they agree with. Here, that's happening here. They just couldn't help themselves. They had to throw that in. This is true, by the way, the author says. Okay, cool. Their assumption, true enough, it seems, was that a victim of blackmail would be harmed if shameful but private information were revealed to the world. So what we see is in a blackmail arrangement, if what I would share would actually hurt somebody, that's illegal because of the harm. I'm harming them. That's what would be illegal. We don't need to call it blackmail. I was a dick, okay? That's just illegal. You can't do that to people. All right. And if the shame would cause harm to the person's status or reputation, then prima facie, if you're not a lawyer or a law student who loves trying to use Latin whenever possible, you might be like, what the heck does this mean? I'm not going to tell you. And we're going to use context clues to figure it out. Then prima facie, the threatened act of revelation was unlawful. Okay. One of the first things I love to do with words I don't know is read the sentence pretending like they're not there and seeing if the meaning seems pretty clear. So if we try this sentence here, it says, if shame would cause harm to the person's status or reputation, look, we see harm already. We should know, based in Roman law, what this means. You cause harm, that's illegal. Okay. Then the threatened act of revelation was unlawful. That checks out with the meaning that we've already been given about how law works. Great. Plug in something, don't read it, it means the same. Prima facie just means if you're a stuck-up law student or some Harvard brain, just on its face, at first look, plainly by looking at it, illegal, which, as you can see, doesn't change the meaning of the sentence whatsoever. Don't let scary words throw you off your track. Don't let them knock you out of the saddle. Really, there's always clues, and the passage tells you everything that's really important as we look at it. Okay, so harm, bad. The burden of proof shifted to the possessor of information. Think about this. We're always picturing blackmail. We're thinking about me and Robert. Robert has gum right in his pocket, but I have the information about it, okay? In Rome, burden of proof has shifted to me. Burden to prove what? We haven't read yet, but I want to have this picture in my head before I read the back half of the sentence. Okay, the party who had or threatened to reveal shameful facts had to show positive cause for the privilege of revealing the information. Okay, I had to show why I should be able to say it. So I'd be like, Your Honor, I've got this fact about Robert. It's really juicy. I should be able to say it. And the judge is like, prove it. Prove it's so juicy. More concretely, why you should be able to say it, okay? This means it's on me to be able to show that I can blackmail. Okay. In short, assertion of the truth of the shameful act being revealed was not itself sufficient to constitute a legal privilege. Check this out. So if it's totally true that Robert stole all that gum, that's not enough. Okay, it could still be illegal. And we should already be able to say, well, in Rome, when would that be illegal? Why would it be illegal? When it causes significant harm to Robert, right? Reputation or him as a person, that's when it would be illegal, okay? So I have to prove probably that it wouldn't cause harm like that, or that I'm justified in revealing it in a way we haven't yet encountered. Okay, granted, truth was not wholly irrelevant. Well, I hope not. False disclosures are granted even less protection than true ones. This is hilarious to me because it doesn't say they were granted no protection. Like, to me, I'd be like, lies about somebody, maybe we shouldn't protect those at all. But in Rome, they're like, some of them. Okay, Robert didn't have gum, but you're still fine blackmailing him for it. This could be crazy. All right, so less protection for lies. Truth, not enough. Great time to practice, sufficient and necessary in your brain, NRC. Fun little workout if you want to think about it. Okay. But even if it were true, the revelation of shameful information was protected only if the revelation had been made for a legitimate purpose and dealt with a matter that the public authorities had an interest in having revealed. Okay, sure. So when the government cares about it, it's good. Reveal it. It's just like so self-serving to me. Okay, so I've got this true information. It could be super shameful. Robert is like so ashamed he stole 5 pieces of gum. His family's gonna disown him. No one will talk to him again. Lose his job. Won't go to law school. Just gonna be a gum bandit for the rest of his days because he can find no other gainful employment. Okay. Then it would be legitimate when the government has an interest. If there's like a new government initiative to like stop all gum thieves, we hate them. I'm probably clear to release it. It doesn't matter what harm it causes to Robert. The government really cares about it. It's fine. Okay, we're good. Nice. We end here saying, just because something shameful happened to be true did not mean it was lawful to reveal it. Okay, I need to have positive cause. The one we're presented here is government interest. Public authorities are interested in gum thieves, that I can do it. Now, I want to add a little bit of method to this madness. I do have fun when I read RC, even on the test. But the skill lying beneath that is to look at abstract terms like blackmail and harm and 1 party, 2 party, 3 parties, by not letting that stay abstract and just plugging things in. Our brains work better that way. You can draw examples from your daily life. You could pick somebody you really hate and make them the blackmailer, or maybe your blackmail victim. right? You can picture things this way, and it absolutely cuts these passages down to size, makes them super easy to carry with you. It's a great way to understand terms. Otherwise, you're trying to constantly use triangular structure or states chip or harm caused would not be sufficient. Just think about these things, visualize. It's one of the best skills you can use in RC. So yes, I'm a goofball. You might not be a goofball as much as I am when you read, but always apply the same understanding you use in everyday life. Be who you are in RC and let those examples fill up the page. These become so much better to read when you do so. So as we end this passage, we're both talking about blackmail. There's a lot of overlap in subject. However, there's a big difference in what blackmail we would consider illegal. In passage A, blackmail is illegal. We were confused for a minute. Why? We eventually got to a point where blackmail is illegal, should be, because it's weaponizing the power of the state. It's me bargaining with the power to get someone in prison, to not have someone in prison, me as an individual, okay? So blackmail seems pretty broadly wrong in the world of passage A. In passage B, there is no blackmail. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. All we do in passage B is look at sharing information about somebody. If it causes them harm, bad. That's illegal. You can't harm people like that, idiot. But if the state's really interested in it, if it's information that they care about, get it out. You're fine. Let's hear it. Not illegal, okay? So I can extort this money. I can require payment. It's fine. It's my right to reveal it. I can do it. So pay up, okay? Blackmail, not a thing. So I try to sum this up. We look at A, we're thinking that triangular structure, states chip. We look at passage B, for me to figure out in Rome whether something's illegal or not, I'm looking for harm. Who's harmed? And is there a state's interest to say it's okay anyway? These are the things the questions will ask us to do as we go through. Step into this passage, tell me if it's illegal. Step into that passage, tell me if it's illegal. Find something both passages would say is illegal. That's all we're going to do. It's great to find those reps here now before we head in. I want to go through many of these questions, if not all. Okay, we can do 14 really quick. Which one of the following is the central topic of each passage? Well, so I think it's more like a philosophy of blackmail and crime is really what I'd be thinking about here. What's illegal? Why should it be illegal? Okay. When we have a both passages frame, we first want to start by reading, for me, passage A. Every answer choice has to meet this threshold of central topic of passage A. If not, I leave already. Then, if it also is a central topic of passage B, it has to be the answer. Only one of them will pass both of those tests. And create these steps for you as you go through. It helps you focus, helps you be specific, also helps you recognize what the right answer is going to be doing. So we look at A, why triangular transactions are illegal. Okay, well, I don't know every triangular transaction. I know the triangular transaction of blackmail. Even if I tried to say, sure, this is A, B does not talk about this at all, so we can leave. B says the role of the right to free speech in a given legal system. This is much too broad for our topic in A. B, I don't think use the language of RC at all, or free speech at all, so we can leave this one as well. Look how dismissive we can be to some of these answer choices in a must be true section like this. The bar is really high for an answer choice, which means we can spot a lot of problems and wrong answers often. C says how blackmail has been handled in a given legal system. Yeah, I don't know how this couldn't be correct. I could try hard to eliminate this. There's no way. A talks about blackmail specifically, the paradox about it in US and Canadian law. Passage B says, well, blackmail isn't really a law, but here's sort of how they handled it. Both of those talking about blackmail. Great. Let's eliminate D and E. D says the history of blackmail is a legal concept. I don't have any history here. Don't pass a word like that and just swallow it. I don't know. Just because Rome is early and US Canadian later, I can't read that as history of both in these passages. No way. He says why no good explanation of the illegality of blackmail exists. No. One, even if we thought this were A gave us a good explanation in their opinion. They solved the paradox to them. Doesn't match that. And in B, there is no blackmail. So Wouldn't really fit there. Let's move on to 15. We're going to keep it rolling. 15 says, in using the phrase the state's chip, the author of passage A most clearly means to refer to a government. What did I call it? The weaponized boot of the state. The way to get someone in trouble for crimes. Okay. Like that's the threat overhanging this blackmail relationship. If I were to reveal this information about Robert, going to prison forever. Okay. This is what I'm looking for. Now, I know the answer is not going to have those words. It would be awesome if it did, but it's going to have the relationship in that concept the same way I described it. We have this state overhanging our blackmail conversation, the elephant in the room. Okay. All right. A says the legal authority to determine what actions are crimes. Well, not necessarily. I'm not bargaining with the authority to determine what actions are crimes. If it wasn't understood between all parties that this was a crime, we'd have no ability to blackmail because Robert would be like, sure, tell people. I don't know. That's not a crime. Maybe I wouldn't even know it is a crime. We're not bargaining over determining crime. I'm bargaining over revealing something we all know is a crime. This would be my concern with A, looking at it. All of these words need to be perfect, okay? So when we look at legal authority, I am not looking at the legal authority to define this is a crime, that is a crime, that's a crime too, this is a crime. In my opinion, and the way passage A described it, I could only blackmail using the state's chip if we know the state would get Robert in trouble for it already. That authority has been determined. I'm not trying to usurp the place of Congress in passing like a criminal statute here. That's the legal authority to determine crimes. So let's see. A lot of people in chat said they selected A, okay? Which can happen. You can have an answer choice that you say, this is it. Well, if we're reading specifically in every single answer choice, whenever we have the right answer still to go, we should find it impossible to eliminate because our eliminations should be specific. They should be based in particular language. We should be able to spot a problem right here if we're kicking something out. So let's try. We'll go down the list. B says, legitimate interest in learning about crimes committed in its jurisdiction. Okay, yes. So when we look at blackmail, what's the interaction about? It's about whether I'm going to spread the word about this horrendous crime. Okay, I get to decide completely. I have knowledge of this crime. It's up to me whether other people do, whether we actually seek justice as a society, whether the police get involved, whether that person is allowed to just go forth and be free despite the fact they did something horrible. Maybe my gum example here isn't so helpful. You could imagine a heinous crime here, violent, graphic, horrendous, dark. Maybe that would give an answer like this a little bit more color, right? Is it appropriate that I should get to decide? I should get to bargain with whether the state knows about that? No way. So when we see legitimate interest in learning about crimes, necessarily this is why we have criminal statutes. This is the society saying, yes, we have an interest in preventing this. And it's me that's stopping those from being publicized, being reported or not. This is what our passage says is inappropriate. It's a misuse of that state authority. I could find no word to quibble with or contest in B. Got to be the answer. Let's go to C, D, and E, eliminate those. C says legitimate interest in preventing crimes before they occur. Nope, blackmail is after the fact every time. We can't, I'm going back to a criminal law hypo. Maybe you could blackmail somebody over the intent to solicit or an attempt to do a crime. Not what we saw in passage A. We don't want our brains to go in those rabbit holes here. It's got to be something we talked about, right? All the questions in RC, remember our conversation in LR, are closed questions. We're just describing what happened. This isn't what happened here. D, exclusive reliance on private citizens as a source of important information. No. The state's chip doesn't mean the only way that the state can understand information about crime. The cops and the state have lots of ways to understand crime. The passage never implied otherwise. This also wouldn't really fit as a triangular component of a transaction. The state doesn't just rely on us. E, legal ability to compel its citizens to testify in court. No, we never talked about testifying, never really talked about court. Not something I want to think about here. Answer would be B. Let me see, we can probably do one or two more of these. I know we're over time. Looks like, oh, people hate analogy questions. Let's go to 19. Okay, 19 says, the relationship between the ways in which Canadian and US common law and classical Roman law, or what we could say, the relationship between A and B is most analogous to the relationship between the following in the answer choices below. So one thing I want you to notice is how many words in these types of questions are just irrelevant. A lot of students really get on the back foot translating these questions on the first pass because they're mimicking that behavior of trying to carry all of these abstracted words with them into making their prediction. All of this says is the relationship between A and B is like which of the following, which of the choices below. This is all we have to figure out. So many words in here that don't matter. So carry this understanding with us. The nice thing is, if you read the way that we have, this is something you should have been doing the entire time. Our way of understanding, our way of reading is finding analogies here. So when we look at A and B, they both discuss blackmail. In A, blackmail is illegal because we have this other party's chip, right? So just per se, it is illegal and it's fine. We had to go on a bit of a journey for why it's illegal, but we got there. So it's okay that it's illegal. It's just illegal to do it. Don't do it. We look at passage B, it's like a, well, maybe some of those behaviors could be illegal if they cause harm. Okay. Maybe there's a compelling interest here in gum thieves, Robert. Maybe I'm okay doing what I would do in Rome. This is what I want to see. So if I look at analogies here, first, we're going to discuss A. I want to see A, and the example about it be something that's just illegal. Has to be illegal. Blackmail is illegal. If they have something in there about the triangular structure and stateship, even better. But a requirement, got to be something that's illegal. What do I need to see in our discussion about passage B? What we talked about is, well, it could be illegal based on this and this. Cause harm, no state interest, little bit of wiggle room. Okay. Now, when we go in with this shopping list, we can't lose it. We have to evaluate all of these choices specifically, has to match A perfectly in how A talks about blackmail. Then, if it does, we move on to looking at B. I never have a suspect feeling about, well, maybe that wasn't A, and then read the second half. Absolutely not. We have to vouch for every word that we read as we pass it or we're out of there. It's not a problem to eliminate all five. It's a problem to select something and move on, thinking it's correct when you haven't done the work. Okay, so let's go to A. One country legally requires anyone working as a carpenter to be licensed and insured. I'm a creative guy. I see no way, however, to make this be like blackmail. This is just not something that I could describe. I need to see an act that just is illegal. This is not that. Already, I would leave A. This is just not something that can really match our structure. Let's go to B. One country makes it illegal to use cell phones on trains. Sure, this is fine. Cell phones on train, it's illegal per se. Cool. What would I need to see in the passage B component? Well, we don't have a specific crime about phone use on trains being illegal, but maybe if using the phone causes harm to people other places, then it could still be illegal. This is what I need to see. Could be illegal, doesn't have to be. Let's look at the second half. Another country makes it illegal to use cell phones on both trains and buses. No, it's illegal and it's even more illegal here, which is not the structure that we have in A and B. We can leave. C, one country legally allows many income tax deductions and exemptions. I just want to find a crime here in the first half. That's it. And I know that might seem simple, but I am just confident the first part of this answer and the correct answer is just going to be a crime that's illegal. This off the rip isn't that. So I would leave. If we eliminate all five, we can go back, but never hesitate to knock these out. Okay, D, one country makes it illegal for felons to own guns. Sure. This matches blackmail. It's just illegal. Okay. It's a crime. What do I need to see? Something that isn't about felons owning guns specifically. Remember, there's no crime for blackmail in B, but something that could still end up criminalizing some of the same behavior, right? If it causes harm, yada, yada, yada. If there's other criteria, it could be illegal. We don't have a crime about felons and guns, though. Okay. If I see in the second component, it's a crime for felon to have guns, it's wrong. Blackmail doesn't exist in B. Okay. So this same crime cannot exist. Okay. Second part says another country has no such ban. Nice. Good start. This says there is no blackmail. There is no felon gun possession law because it makes gun ownership illegal for everyone but police and the military. Okay. This one is bigger in size, but as we look at passage B, when we think about blackmail, there was an exception for blackmail, and the exception was state interest. Right? If the state has an interest in the behavior, you can do it. The state has an interest in revealing information, it's fine for you to do so. In this one, we see similarly, don't own a gun. However, if there is this caveat met, which happens to be state interest as well, police and the military, it's okay. What I would love is if there was some mention about harm. But when we look at the world of passage B, we actually get on the ground thinking about trying to blackmail somebody. Could you imagine actually being that successful in trying to blackmail somebody? All they have to do is show that there is harm, and you're screwed, you would lose. Personal harm, reputational harm, you can't do it. So while B might read as kind of softer on blackmail, which maybe in some ways it is, it's still basically a prohibition on the behavior. So when I look at the size of the second clause in D, I'm really trying to work with it. I'm really trying to eliminate it. This is what I always try to do. I think it matches B okay. Could I imagine an answer choice that might fit it even better if I got to write it? Sure. But I can't find a way to eliminate D based on this second clause and its relationship to passage B. I can't. I'm trying. We have an exception to a behavior that's not a crime per se. This seems just like passage B. I would have written it much different. But because our understanding is good, our prediction was about the relationship, we made that shopping list. We can recognize answers that need to be correct, even if they aren't exactly what we would have predicted. So let's eliminate E specifically for a great reason. Then we'll feel good. E says one country makes it illegal to drive motorcycles with racing grade engines on its roads. Nice. We have an illegal thing. I don't care what it is. It literally doesn't matter to me. I just need to see a crime. Second part says another country legally permits such motorcycles. So this would be US and Canada makes blackmail illegal. Rome legally permits blackmail, which I don't think is what we're talking about here. Rome literally didn't have a crime that was blackmail. There was no match. There wasn't, it's illegal here, it's legal here. It didn't exist. Like their brains would have exploded with the word blackmail. Didn't exist, didn't know it, okay? So here in E, I've got a problem already. But it says, but fines riders who commit traffic violations higher amounts than it does other motorists. No, this isn't how blackmail would work in Rome. It wasn't, some people were fined more for blackmail than others. There was no relative sentencing that we had in passage B. It was either illegal or not. But remember, there was no base crime. Couple problems here with B. I see a question in chat, Brianna. So passage A, it starts off saying the component parts of blackmail are legal, but blackmail overall is still illegal. It's talking to us about something that is a crime. And we end up by the end explaining philosophically why it's okay that it's a crime. Our author seems to solve that problem. So this means, just summing this up, we've always been talking about a crime in A. It's just a bit of a conversation about why is it a crime? Why is it illegal? So this means in a quick scan of these answer choices, the first place I want to start to kick out wrong ones in this analogy question is if we're talking about something that isn't a crime. Because blackmail always is in the world of passage A. It's just a bit of a dialogue about why. Okay, this is going to close our RC unit. If there are any questions about RC, let me know, put them in chat. And then for our LG June bugs out there, I'm going to hop into a lodge game soon after. So if the masses want to depart and make me sad and just not be able to sleep tonight because I'm thinking about all these people leaving, that's okay. You can go. I am going to do a logic game, and I'm going to stay after for some slight Q&A after, if people want. I know we have another class at 6, so I don't want to hold you past that time. If you got to go, feel free. I'm going to hop into an LG. Goodbye, non-June takers. Good luck whenever your test is. We'll let you know how June goes. We'll wish logic games goodbye for you. They miss you, even if you don't miss them. Think of how sad you must be to be a logic game. You've had this like reign of terror over so many students for years, you know, popping up your drill number, having people try to like write your worlds, and you just keep punching them down until they figure you out. Now you're just gone, irrelevant, dinosaurs. Okay, jeez, like the crystal radio. Looking at the poll here, it looks like, what game we want to talk about? Oh, this is really close, 0.42%. Let me take a look and see which of these might be a better lesson. I think either could be. We'll just follow democracy. I'm not a tyrant. I'm not a despot. I'm going to answer a couple RC questions from people left, then we're going to hop into game 4 of this one. Test 65, game 4. Okay, Brianna asks, how long should we actually take on one RC question during the real test? Well, so these are difficult questions to answer, not because they're bad questions to ask in your head, but because they, in some ways, misunderstand the process. Because what I want to be certain of on test day is that every question I answer is a point in my favor. I need to know I'm racking up points as I move through my section. And if that process starts to be infected by doubt, if I start to be more motivated by completion than actually knowing that what I've done is solid and good, it leads me to a place where I never know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to on the test. And the whole thing is like a slot machine pull. So this is something ideally we're arriving to the test after a long period of study with a very consistent method and reliable performance across these sections. So if I don't, for example, finish passage 4, it's because I regularly don't, and I know what my scores are when I don't do that, and that's fine. So on test day, as we go through, what I would say, if we're having difficulty in the questions, we start to worry about the clock, it's a sign that something in our method might be off. We're lacking some of the understanding that would have enabled us to be here. So rather than thinking about, okay, I've got 8 minutes, let me try to crush it, or I've got 6 minutes, let me do my thing, is rather, how can I, from minute 1 on this test, always do what I'm supposed to do so that the questions can go as quickly as you saw me do them here in class. And you might be operating under a similar feeling that I had when I first started studying, that most of our students have, that level of answering questions is impossible. And I want to tell you, it's not. You could do that right here today. You could leave and pull up a passage right now, read it the same way we did, answer questions just as confidently. Some level of your process and growth in this test has to be first believing that you can. You can answer any question the test is going to give you. You can understand and attack any argument you're going to read. And the second part is forcing yourself to do so. And my advice to you is on test day, you can't do anything different than that. Because anything less than that is a total uncharted land of uncertainty where I have no idea what my score is going to be. I never know if I'm answering a question correctly, and I will get more and more uncertain and doubtful as I progress through the sections of the test. It's all just a slot machine pull. And so I believe in all of you already that you can grow on this test. You absolutely can answer any of these questions. And I want you to arrive at your test day when you have the same confidence in yourself. So that means if I'm in a passage 2 and it's taken me a while, I know it's taking me a while because I need it to take a while to understand it. And I'm certain better days are coming. These sections are balanced. Sometimes they can throw a really hard thing early. Well, that means you've got easier days ahead. All that matters is I'm doing what I always do, reading the way I always have. answering questions with the same technique I do every time. And then I know my score is going to be consistent, no matter what I'm able to get to at the end or not. So that was maybe the most unhelpful answer I could have given you, but this is the only way I found success in my study process. Mitchell.
So if I'm not already signed up for the June LSAT, that means that I cannot take logic games.
That would be correct. Yeah, this is the final days. They're gone.
Yes. Okay. What time do you predict you'll be done? Because I want to join back in after the logic games is.
Well, I know I'm going to get students out of here before 6 because there's a class at 6. I'm already overstaying my welcome. What were we supposed to end at?
Oh,
5?
what time are you on? Like where in the world?
Oh.
Because it's 6:30 where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm a Midwest baby, so it's 5:30 for me. There's a class at 7 Eastern. I'm getting people out of here before that. So I'm gonna rip through a logic game real quick for any gamers here, any June bugs. Then we'll do some Q&A after. I might not do all the questions in the logic game, my fellow June bugs, but as we know, if we do our work in making worlds, the questions are kind of a done deal. And what I'm trying to get you to understand about all the other sections is they all work the same way. If we get our understanding of an RC passage, if we attack our argument in the right way, questions are a done deal too. So LG is no different. I'm gonna hop into game 4 here. Let me drop it in chat for anybody who wants to see it. After that, we'll do some more Q&A, and then I will free you from this prison. All right, so this is Test 65 Game 4 TV programs. It says a television programming director is scheduling a 3-hour block of programs beginning at 1 p.m. Okay, this is prime grandma soap opera hours. If my babysitting experience is any indicator. So this is how I'm picturing all these programs we're going to see. Some really spicy soaps here. Okay. Include an hour-long program called Generations. Yeah, that sounds like it off the rip. That's totally a soap opera. And 4 half-hour programs: Roman, Sundown, Terry. That sounds like a goofy comedy. Some real dope named Terry. And Waterloo, probably like a war show. Okay. Of note, actually being real here, we have blocks from 1 onward. I have 1 hour-long program. I have some that are half-hour programs. This tells me I need to think of a shape, a diagram, a picture, a world, if you will, that gives me the ability to report out by the half hour what time things are going. Okay, so we have a 3-hour block of programming. It starts at 1, but I want to have lots of spaces in here for all of these half-hour shows. We have effectively 5 variables here, but I'm going to fill up 6 slots, if that makes sense. So if we were gramming this out, for me, this is what I'm picturing. We have 1, 2, 3 on the half-hour blocks here. So 1, 132, 233, 330, whatever makes sense to you. Make sure you only leave your passage when you've got a shape in your head, because we want to understand these rules by applying them to our shape, by thinking what they would look like, plugging them in, seeing what possibilities they have. So let's start this. Oh, we still have some stuff to read. The programs will be shown one after the other. Nice. Nothing at the same time on one station. Makes sense. Great. Each program shown exactly once, no repeats. This eliminates a lot of flexibility that we didn't want to think about. Schedule must meet the rules below. As we read these rules, any of our demon friends will know what we're looking for is some rule that is a real pain in the butt. It's real bossy. It's pushing all the other rules around. In this diagram, it might be something that's taking up a lot of space. It might be dominating a lot of the conversation. It should be a rule that you think like, gosh, if I could just get that pinned down, I would know so much about everything else. I will kind of lump all of those thoughts into a phrase I call determinative. It's a rule that determines a lot. Ideally, we want to start worlds by picking the most determinative rule, putting all the things it can do on the board. It can do this, this, and this. Because once we do that, the rest of the picture becomes a lot easier to paint if we pick the right rule. So first rule says generations starts on the hour rather than the half hour. So remember, Generations is our definite soap opera show. It's also an hour long to fit in all the drama and appropriate commercial breaks. When we look at rules, I always want you to look at them in terms of their options. I'll call that optionality. What options does this give us? Well, if it starts on the hour, either I have generations here, or generations here, which at 3 p.m. is already my grandma's dinner time. So probably a little bit too late, but it can go there. 1, 2, 3. Nice. Could you start worlds with that already? Sure. Do I know what it would tell me to do so? I don't. So when we get those options, we want to hold on to them. As soon as we start to see some dominoes lined up behind moving G around like that, we can start rolling. Okay, rule number 2 says Terry starts on the half hour rather than the hour. Similarly, this gives us 3 spots for Terry, okay? We have here, here, and here. Now, let's meld this understanding. We were just talking about my grandma's soap opera generations. It's taken up one of these itself, okay? This means in each of those worlds, say I've got generation right here, I've just cut Terry down to only 2 spots, here or here. See how we're kind of like mentally building worlds just as we're understanding rules? This is why you don't hurry here. You visualize, you think, so that when you start making worlds, you know everything you have to do. Like your splits are almost already decided, you're already done because you've had all these thoughts as you read. You should never get to the end of the rules and feel like you have to go back to read them again, or you shouldn't start a split not knowing what it tells you. This is how we prevent those problems on test day and just move confidently, smoothly, efficiently through these. Rule 3 says Roman is shown earlier than sundown. Now, as we see earlier, this does give us a little bit of flexibility, but there are some limits based on where G is, based on where T is. So imagine I have G here, taking up this whole spot. This limits Terry to our half-hour spots, right? And so R and S have to play around that structure. Okay, R is going to be before S always. Last rule, if Waterloo is shown earlier than Terry, it's shown immediately before Terry. Okay. If then rules can seem much scarier than they are, what we want to do is to cut this down to size by realizing this rule only exists when Waterloo is earlier than Terry. Who gets to decide when that happens? We do. We're just going to put all the possibilities for when Waterloo can be earlier than Terry. This rule is going to be incorporated. Once that's done, this rule doesn't exist. We don't know anything about Waterloo as relates to Terry and all of the worlds where it's after. When we look at any if-then rule, it's only got 2 possibilities. It either happens or it doesn't. For us to incorporate it into worlds, we just have to cover those 2 sides. So let's put some structure to this conversation. If we imagine worlds as we were describing, with G moving to all of these spots, what's going to be a great way to frame it from there? Well, if we put T in the places where T can go, we can see if it's even possible for Waterloo to be before or after Terry in some of these. If it is, we'll run through that possibility. And then I think we'll sprinkle R's and S's on top and be out of here pretty smoothly. Okay, so let's create these initial splits with generations. We'll see what we can do from there. I want to leave some room for splitting. I also anticipate there's going to be a couple. If my board gets cramped, apologies in advance. So already here, we're done with generations, never have to worry about it again. That rule incorporated, done and dusted, gone. From here, there's different directions you could take. As always, if we're incorporating rules in the right way, meaning expressing all their possibilities, we'll always end at a destination that is perfect worlds. But there are still some conversations we should have internally about what's going to be the best way to split from here. 2 of these rules left relate to Terry and what W is doing around Terry, which gives me that feeling if I could just sort out what T is doing, I feel a lot better. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's sort out what T could do in each of these worlds. So up here, T is on the half hour. That means it gives it 2 spots. One of them could be here. One of them could be here. If we build in that understanding about the last rule, if Waterloo is earlier than Terry, it's right before. Well, here, when I have T at the end, Waterloo is always before Terry, which means it's always going to be right here. This will be a pretty easy world for us to put together. If I have Terry right here, Waterloo could be before or after. What I want to do initially is just create these splits, solve T. Then we can move on to W. One thing at a time. I call this the rule of lasagna. One clean layer, then the next. So we're going to do our T layer right here. We're laying down our noodles. We'll put a nice bolognese W sauce on top after we're done. Okay, So let's put T at the end here. That's going to be pretty easy for us. And then we'll copy this one. We'll put T on the half hour right there. Same thing with Terry all through these. I'm going to keep starting with T at the end here because this will eventually make our W world pretty clean up here. Shouldn't need to split it. But in each of these, we're going to have two possibilities for Terry. Still on the half hour over here. This last world, as we finish this T layer, we'll have T on this half hour. And then one where T is going right here. Okay, let's do that W layer. Be really orderly and clean in our process. Remember the rule, if W is before T, it's right before T. In this world, it's always before T, no matter where we tried to put it. What would this mean? W is always here. Cool. If I look at this world, I can either have W before T, or I can have it after. You know what that means? There's our splits. It's easy as that. So I could have W before T, or it could be after. Nice. In this world, W is always before T. That means it's going to be right before. In this world, I could have it before, or I could have it after. That's our splits. W before T, W after T. In this world, let me see how repetitive this is. W is always before T. In this world, W could be before T, or it could be after. There's our split. There's a real rhythm to doing logic games, and let this rhythm work for you as you go through. It will just keep you on pace. This is why I like to do one variable, one layer at a time. I'm not fully solving one world and then trying to go to the next and remember what I'm doing. One clean layer. Because right now I could look at a board, I can say all my W's incorporated, all my T's incorporated, all my G's done. This is 3 of our rules out of here. So I have one tiny little rule to mess with. R is before S. This is like not a problem at all. We've done this 1,000 times in ordering games. We love these rules. And we have created a process to solve this game where that's not a real problem here. Okay, so in this one, R before S, easy peasy. And this one, R before S, easy peasy. Let's copy some of these worlds down here. So we have W doing a little jig on the end here. I could have W all the way at the end here, which means I could have an S right here, right? But is there any way in this world I could ever have R at the end? There's not, if W is taking up that spot. So that means R still locked right there. W and S dancing around, don't really care. I don't need to split those out because there are no rules involving W and S being in those spots. We're going to see a lot of the same rhythm going through. R is before S. In that world, it's the only way it can go. R is before S. Same thing here. If we copy this world down, we have W. Whoa, what did I do? Oh, I wrote W twice. My mistake. We have a similar interaction that we'll have in all of our worlds where W and S could probably dance around those spaces. R locked in that spot. Same thing here. End of my board is filled. This is the only way I can have R before S. Similar thing here. Rest of my board is filled. Here with W moving, can only trade spaces with S. And here I have R and that spot there. Any questions about this setup or what allowed it to happen? Logic games in general? Hopefully you get the feeling that if we were to go to the questions right now, it would be a pretty done deal. There's really not much we could be asked about. We just wouldn't have to look behind us to find. So I want this game to serve as an example of the mindset I want you to use in all of your worlds, right? Think about rules in terms of what options they could have and still be satisfied. Go then, pick the one that solves most of your game, takes up the most space, pushes the other stuff around. After we do that, we should have a clear idea of what's been pushed around. What has it limited? And then go to that option. One activity that I think is always nice is after you finish games like this to remember the way you split them as a study activity, but also to see if you were good in your method, if you split things in a really organized pattern. So our first split here was around our G's. We got our G units figured out. So we went here, and then we went here, and then we went here. All of our worlds are organized by where G is. It's nice to recognize that before you go to questions, because when you have a question that says if this, if that, I immediately know how to orient. After we messed with G's, what did we do? We placed T and all the places that T could go. And this is how we incorporated that. Look how organized this is when you look at it in this way. All the options for G's and T's just spelled out here. After we did that, we got our G's and T's in place. We just then carried further into options with W. Why did we do that? Because W related to T's position. It became pretty easy once we had T known to know where we'd put W. This variable had a couple more possibilities, but they weren't possibilities that were difficult for us to navigate because T was already set in place. And then we messed with R's and S's, but that was kind of just filling in the blanks after. So what I want your worlds to have is a similar logic going through them, a similar pattern, similar orderliness as we show up to logic games. Every step you make should be to incorporate or eliminate a rule. If I instead am just kind of brainstorming a possibility that I could see that works and then put it on the piece of paper as a world, it's not really a world because all my rules are still out there. I just thought of one example that could work. That's the difference between scenarios and worlds. The purpose of making worlds is to eliminate rules. I have no need to look at the rules on the page anymore. There are none I have to think about ever again. It's done. This is why we make worlds. Now, I see some good questions in chat about when we look at making worlds, do we always make every single scenario? Definitely not. And this is where logic games are a little bit more art than science. One of the cool things about studying LG at LSAT Demon is you can pop up those videos and see one where Matt does like 12 worlds and it's awesome. And he does it just the way we did, super orderly, very efficient, clear plan in mind. Then you'll see Ben, who makes a really flexible diagram that incorporates all the possibilities of what the worlds can do, maybe in one or two worlds. Both of those are worlds because they incorporate the rules. They find the areas where we're not flexible. They put those on the board. They acknowledge what rules are left in the flexible areas and what the variables could be doing. What I always tell students is the purpose of your study should be to identify where on that spectrum of fully solving everything and leaving things flexible you like to land. And for me, it varies based on the game. I tell students I want your worlds to be as flexible as the rules are. If I try to keep nailing down this super flexible rule that has a ton of options and a bunch of different places it can go here and here and here and here and here and here and here, I'm probably wasting a bit of my time when I could just write that rule in my world saying, hey, X is really flexible, or X can go here all the way to here. Because things might not really change if I put it in place. The way to think about flexible worlds that are still worlds are like your web games. It's not worth it to spell out all the possibilities of how variables in a web game can go. That might take 10, 12, 15 sometime worlds. We can make one that incorporates all the rules. So for me, I always like to think about worlds as sometimes they're full solutions like this one, all the scenarios spelled out. Sometimes they're the best tool for making those based on the piece of information that a question is going to provide us, like a web game. As soon as you learn in a web game that like A goes here, easy. You can sort everything else out. You know what has to be true. You know what could be flexible. You don't even have to make the world. You can just see it, okay? This is how I want your flexible games to feel when you do it. Do I draw a box similar to these? Not really, not anymore. This was a great review tool for me because sometimes I would like get done with worlds and I'd be like, I did a good job. I could tell, but I kind of forget how I got there or what I did. This helped ground me in my process. This is how I developed the law of lasagna, laying down that nice clean layer across all of your worlds all the time so you don't get mixed up building a square at a time. This is how I did that, just by really grounding myself in what I did. Now, when I finish games, I definitely take a good look-see at my board so I know how to access information. So for here, I'd say like, oh, my G's are going like that. That just gives me a great reference tool to check in with all my worlds and know quickly where to go when a question builds me around. I see a student ask, any tips for in and out games? Yes, we also have tons of great materials. I think in and out games are where a lot of students here at LSAT Demon love what we call the circle slash technique, which we have lessons for, we have a full boot camp for. The thing that I would say unlocks in and out games for students is being comfortable with navigating conditional rules. What students often get in trouble with in and out games is implying a bilateral relationship. So for example, I can just give you a quick and dirty primer on circle slash super duper quick as a way to show this. So if we have an in and out game, often there could be a set of variables, right? So when we have an in and out game, they're usually built on conditional rules. So they could be things like if A, then B, and if not C, then D. This will be the only time you will ever see me write rules like this. If Nathan saw it, I would get fired immediately. You don't need to do this, but I just want us to have common set of information to work with. So whenever we look at a conditional rule, the first piece of understanding I want you to have is it can only either happen or not happen. That's it. That's the only thing a conditional rule can do. So as it relates to in and out, that means A could be in or A could be out. That's all. Nothing else can happen. If I build those worlds, I'm safe. I've got it incorporated. So I can then look at a tool like circle slash to do this, where I could say, all right, in this one, A is in, and in this one, A is out. If I'm using my old-fashioned reliable model T-chart, that will look something like in this world, A is in, and over here, A is out, right? T-charts are fine if you like those. Little old-fashioned, but hey, the classics still work. I was a T-charter on my LSAT, so don't let anyone knock you. Now, if I have my world where A is in, I can see this rule is active because it tells me it is. If A, then I know something. This is the time I can follow this rule. If A is in, then I've got B. My rule is incorporated. This is all I ever have to think about it. It's done. So then what do I do when there are rules left? I look at those possibilities that they give me, see if they're still present, right? So could it still be possible for C not to be in either of these worlds? Certainly, I can have C in or out. Why is that something I want to split on? Well, because it relates to a rule. So all I have to do is incorporate those possibilities and I'm out of here. If C can be in or out, let me create those worlds right here. Okay, in this world, one of them I could have C in. This rule doesn't tell me anything about C being in, so I don't have to worry about it. I leave it. This rule, not that world. In this world where C is out, well, this is exactly what that rule says. And now I just follow the instructions. If not C, what happened? D is in. Great, done. Now over here, we have a similar situation. Could have C, don't have to. When I have C in, that's not what this rule says, so I don't know a darn thing. Over here, when C is out, I follow the rule, easy peasy, D is in, and we're out of here. All of your in-out games have the same structure. Follow the rules, look at the possibilities they tell you, turn them on, turn them off. I always tell students to look at them in terms of like light switches, right? If you turn it on, really easy to see what happens. This bulb activates. If I turn on the A switch, B comes, okay? If I turn off the A switch, maybe something else could turn on B. I don't know. The rule doesn't tell me, okay? I'm not in my A switch anymore. So whenever we have an if-then rule, turn it on, turn it off. This is how we incorporate it. Ideally, in an in-out game, we're picking the rule that makes the most things happen. You'll find a lot of variables mentioned lots of times. If you have A, you have to have B. If you have B, you can't have this. If you have that, you can't have A. You get a lot of those connections. Pick some of those connections that are easy for you to understand and that make things happen on your board. In-out games won't be a problem for you for long. That was a real quick and dirty primer. Hopefully that was helpful. Okay, I'm going to cut the recording here. I went way over. Surprise. I had no idea how long test reviews take. Maybe we'll increase the time on these. Robert and I will figure it out. Thanks all for coming for the content. I'm going to stay after just for some quick Q&A. If students have individual things they want to talk about or questions asked they don't want going to the FBI on YouTube, hang out with me. Robert and I will straighten you out. Thanks, everybody.